Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda. I'm autistic, I have ADHD, I have total aphantasia, and I have a memory disorder called SDAN, and it stands for severely deficient autobiographical memory. So today I kind of want to talk a little bit about the stereotypical trait of empathy that is found in autism. So if you were to ask the general public if they thought that autistic people could show empathy, most people are going to say, oh no, I don't think autistic people can show empathy. And that's why it's become a stereotype that autistic people, are not empathetic. But unfortunately, that is because empathy is perceived as a good thing in our culture. Like if you're empathetic, it's good. And that's a perceived thing. Empathy is like morally neutral, and I'll go into that in a little bit more later. But researchers who are studying autism, as we have learned, they have focused on perceived negative behaviors and deficits from autistic people. That is like what they like to focus their research on. Their like entire basis of researching autistic people is that how we do not work in a neurotypical world because of the problems we cause, because of the behaviors. When we don't just kind of go along with the neurotypical way of life, then that's like a wall that we get hit up against, and we get labeled with the negative traits of autism. So the narrative is changing about the empathy, because actually autistic adults who are diagnosed are coming out and they're like, I'm autistic and I am hyper empathetic, or I do have empathy. So again, autism is in the traits. So the spectrum of autism does not go from allistic, which means not autistic, to slightly autistic to autistic. That does not exist. That line that people have in their head is not real. Autism is binary. You are autistic or you are allistic. And if you are autistic, that's where the spectrum is. It's in the traits. The spectrum is in the traits. So you have all of these shared traits within the community, and those are different than diagnostic criteria. We can get into that in another video, but shared traits around the autistic community. And it's important to note that these are human traits. Autistic people have empathy or don't have empathy, and so do allistic people. Every single autistic trait is a human trait because we are human. Surprise. But when we get enough autistic traits, and because we tend to share these at these like extremes instead of just like in the middle where like a neurotypical allistic person might be, these become detrimental to daily life. And then that's where the autism spectrum happens, when we have enough of these traits that become a detriment to living a normal life without stress and overstimulation of our nervous systems. Then that's where autism is. I don't have a fidget today, so as you can see, I'm very handsy because I didn't grab a fidget. I do have my squishy though, so I'll maybe squish on him. So I just distracted myself. The traits. Okay, so yes, so the spectrum is in the traits. So we have hypo on a trait and we have hyper on a trait. And so you can take any trait like noise sensitivity. I am hypersensitive to too much noise. If I get around too much noise, my nervous system dysregulates and I can go into a shutdown or meltdown or get very overstimulated. Some autistic people really do crave a lot of noise. They love going to concerts in really loud environments, or they play music in their headphones all day long because they need a lot of noise. So they might be hyposensitive to noise. With empathy, the researchers kind of focused in on the autistic people who have hypoempathy and discounted any hyper empathetic people. But there are a lot of autistic people who are hyper empathetic, and they empathize with other people that they're around, animals, and even inanimate objects like their stuffed animals. So if a stuffed animal gets put up on the shelf and doesn't get used in a while, the autistic person actually like feels emotions for that animal. They're like, oh, he's feeling bad. He's not feeling loved. And they then have to interact with that stuffed animal because they're empathizing with the emotions that they have assigned to this stuffed animal. So my son is like that. And that's why we had a really interesting conversation about his like hyper empathy, where I'm hypo empathetic. I do not have a natural inclination of empathy. I have cognitive empathy, so that means that I am aware when somebody might be in distress and that I should be showing empathy. That is where we go into masking. So growing up, before I knew I was autistic, I thought that empathy was a skill that you could learn. Like I thought you could learn how to be empathetic, because I noticed that I wasn't empathetic naturally. And of course I felt shame and bad about it because, again, culturally it is perceived that empathetic people are good. And we're going to talk about that. But I don't have, so I am in that stereotype of autism. We exist. I mean, it is a stereotype for a reason, but both exist. And so the reason why empathy in itself is just like a neutral, it's morally neutral. It's not good or bad. It's just I'm not sure what it is exactly. A trait of humans that some people have and some people don't, and it helps some humans relate to other humans. I don't have that, but I can still choose to be kind and compassionate towards people. Those things I think are morally good. If I'm choosing kindness and I'm choosing compassion, I'm not doing it because of a biological self-preservation that is where empathy comes from. And I say that because when you are somebody who is highly empathetic and you are next to somebody who is in distress, you all of a sudden are going to feel their stress. You are going to be stressed. It is in your best nature to help this person with kindness, compassion, so that their stress levels, because when their stress levels, then your stress will then level out and go away. So it appears behaviorally that you are helping this person and removing their stress, but you're also doing it to lower your stress. And I'm not saying that's bad at all. Like, neither one of them are bad. If you're helping another person because it helps you, or you're helping another person because you see they're distressed and you choose to help them, it doesn't matter how you get there. But because behaviorally, when you're watching somebody and you see them helping somebody because they're empathizing with them, empathy then gets perceived to be a good human trait. So I grew up feeling very much shamed that I didn't feel empathy towards people, and I didn't understand it, and it was frustrating. And so I learned how to mask it, and I would try. But see, masking is so draining and difficult, and I could never get it right because I'm mimicking. I'm not doing it authentically. So I would try to mask what I thought people who showed empathy would do. And anytime you're masking and you're not being authentic, then it doesn't come across naturally, because it's not. So it's much better for me just to be true to myself, embrace the fact that I don't have empathy. I can't. My brain doesn't work that way. But that doesn't mean I'm not a kind and compassionate human. So this one is really kind of a hard one, because it sucks to have a trait that most people would agree is like a good thing. and I lack it in my brain. Okay, hold on. I'm going to pause just for a minute. So yes, I do have cognitive empathy. There's a difference between cognitive empathy and emotional empathy. And that means that I can cognitively be aware of a situation that requires empathy. And then I can choose to respond in kind. And what I'm working on in the unmasking process is how to still be true to myself and approach that person with kindness, but not by trying to mimic what I would think somebody should do in that situation. Because that's where I think the mask gets draining, because I'm using so much mental energy to try to appear, again, neurotypical or neurotypical, neuronormative, the same thing. Like I have a good behavior, but it's okay to not have empathy and still be kind and compassionate towards somebody. Like they're not you don't have to collapse those two. You can, they can be separated out. Empathy is just that natural reaction that some people have. And when they're around that person in distress, they're going to also naturally pick up on those emotions and feelings. And then that's when it gives them the cue to respond. They're responding emotionally instead of cognitively. And that's where the difference between those types of empathy come from. Okay, so I hope this video made sense. I know I feel like I said the word empathy like 200,000 times in this video, and that's hyperbole. I'm laughing because even though autistic people, I love to be literal and exacting. Hyperbole sometimes is really fun for me to use, but then I feel like I need to call it out because it's not exacting and precise. And I don't know if that's like the autistic ADHD brain. Like my ADHD brain's like hyperbole and my autistic brain is like exacting. And so I'm just laughing at myself with that one. Okay. Oh my goodness. So I'm just gonna, I guess, wrap it up here. Let me know if you liked me kind of doing a highlight on an autistic trait. I'm going to add this to the playlist of autistic traits where I've gone through, I don't know, like 6 or 7 videos where I've talked about like 5 autistic traits at a time. But this one I wanted to specifically call out and do an entire video on. But I can do that with some of the other ones too, if you like this. But again, just remember that autism spectrum is in the traits. It's where do you fall in that spectrum? Oh, and that was the other thing I wanted to add on to there. Remember that autism is not static disorder, and you can kind of move along that. So usually one person is going, like, I lack empathy. I'm like hypo empathetic. Although I do think there are times when I have empathy towards animals and children that are in distress. But like for the noise one, the noise sensitivity, from day to day, it might change. Like some days, if I'm very regulated, I might have a little bit more tendency. And that's why, like, a lot of times, if you're taking those online autistic tests, if you're answering the questions like how you feel that day, like the answers might change a little bit because it's not static. Some days I'm much more sensitive to noise than other days. Some days I'm so, like, I don't know, it was like 2 days ago, like, oh my gosh, I was so sensitive to light. And other days I'm moderately sensitive to light. So that's where the spectrum is. And I think just neurotypical people tend to fall in the middle of any of these traits more often. And autistic people go hypo. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you guys. Bye.